We are now moving to our next session, and we're going to talk about technology and innovation. So, who here has heard about ChatGPT or is using ChatGPT? No? Only me? Only me? Yay! Everybody? Amazing. We are not going to talk about ChatGPT, no. This panel is going to be about something else. We're going to talk about entrepreneurship and technology and innovation and more, many other things. So I would like to welcome to the chair Dr. Wendy Cukier. I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name. Cukier. Okay, Dr. Wendy Cukier to the chair. Merci, on va applaudir. And joining her, I would like to welcome John Nelson, Director of Innovation Hub at Carleton University, Madame Cheryl Bedard, InCritical Solutions Funding Partner. Ouais, on peut continuer d'applaudir. Deborah Walker, Senior Business Analyst at BMO, and Jonah Chininga, our best technology consultant today. Thank you.
Lunch are short. There are 5 of us.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Thanks so much for that great introduction, and everyone says my name wrong, so don't worry about it at all. My name's Wendy Cukier, and I'm really pleased to be here. I think this is about my 5th, 6th Friends of Africa event, and every year it gets bigger and better, and really pleased to see such a wonderful turnout. I know that through the day there have been discussions about technology, there have been discussions about AI, there have been a number of different angles on the technology, and what we're going to focus on this panel is the adoption of technology in small medium enterprises, because we know there are a huge number of technology options, but if you don't actually have processes to properly utilize them, there's no innovation. Having all the technology in the world doesn't help you if you haven't got the skills, the resources, and the capacity to actually drive change in your organization. So we're going to hear from a very well-qualified panel, and I'll start with you, Cheryl. Maybe we'll ask everybody to just introduce a little bit about their perspective and why technology is such an important driver for SMEs.
I need to put this thing on. Is that good? No?
Here, use this.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Cheryl Bedard, and I have a company called InCritical Solutions, and we are a tech solutions company working in Africa. And if it wasn't for technology, we wouldn't exist. We started the company during COVID, and our entire thrust into the business community in Kenya has been online and using technology. One of the things that we found was most important was to determine what was the technology being used in Kenya and how did it differ from what we use here in North America. Understanding and knowing the technology in the country where you're going to be doing business is essential to your success. And so we spent 3 years working with people in Kenya and understanding the politics, the communities, the thinking processes, the learning processes, and how they communicate. And it is quite different. And so that's where we're really using technology and understanding it and making it fit into the goals and the vision and the mission that we have, which is supplying potable water in Kenya.
Fantastic. And Deborah, how about you?
Hello, I'm Deborah Walker. So I have had the great pleasure, I have over 15 years experience in technology. I sit in the middle, so I sit between BMO and IBM. So I, as a person, I have over 15 years of experience, not only just with technology, but finance and innovation. So BMO is the oldest bank in Canada, and IBM is known for their hardware and software solutions. So it's really a great place to sit because you get to see it from many perspectives.
That's great. Thank you so much. And Jonah? John Jonah.
Not a problem. Hi, everyone. My name is John Nelson. I'm the director of the Innovation Hub at Carleton University in Ottawa. I get the pleasure of driving people nuts on a daily basis by asking tons of questions. We support any students on campus who are interested in entrepreneurship. So whether that is starting a small business, taking a side hustle to the next level, or actually starting and running a full company. One of the things that we have been trying to remember to get all of our students to think about is ensure that whenever they're moving forward with a business, they're thinking about solving a problem that somebody wants solved, making sure that they figure out who cares about it, why they care about it, make sure that there's someone to actually pay them to solve that problem, and ensure that they can justify their company's right to exist. And one of the things that we try to remind everyone is technology is here to stay. Everything is shifting. Things are moving very, very quickly. So a lot of companies will say, it's like, oh, I'm in the tech industry, and others, oh, I'm not. It's like, yes, but you still need to be tech-enabled. So everyone has to think about, they're in a very busy space. Lots of people are doing very similar things, and they have to find a way to ensure that they can compete and win in that space.
Yeah, fun fact, there are now more jobs outside of the information communications technology sector than in it, because as you said, every business now really is a technology business. Jonah, how about you?
Yeah, hi everyone. I've been on the stage for quite a bit today. Jonah Chininga, co-founder and CEO of Woveo, where we provide community wallet services to expand access to affordable credit. And why technology is important. For us, we see that technology is important because it increases access. So as a business, you're able to use technology to reduce the cost structures, which sometimes can create, whether it's financial barriers for people to participate in our economy. So leveraging technology, you're able to have more distribution and then expand the impact that you can have. And then that's kind of like how we're applying it from our side.
So important. And, one of the things, and I'm sorry the minister's gone, but she does amazing work. One of the things that's become more and more apparent is that there's a lack of recognition of how important small, medium enterprises and entrepreneurship is in the Canadian economy, right? So we hear a lot about what the big banks want, what the big ICT companies want, how we're going to introduce SAP and Loblaws and big retailers. But the fact is, in Canada, almost 90% of employment is in small, medium enterprises. And often their needs and the issues that they face are not necessarily front and center when we talk about R&D, when we talk about innovation, or even when we talk about technology adoption. And John, you do a lot of work with startups and SMEs. Can you talk a little bit more about what some of the challenges are that you see with startups and as they grow in terms of adopting technology?
So it's an interesting challenge for a lot of people who are coming in. I think for us, like many of the innovation or entrepreneurship hubs that are attached to colleges and universities or even within specific city centers, we're being approached by companies who are hoping to find an opportunity to deliver a solution and hopefully to be able to scale. And one of the challenges that many of those companies actually have is if you actually find a few clients who say, so you know what, you've got a really good idea. I trust the team. I trust your solution. We're going to go with you. Some of them are absolutely scared stiff when they suddenly have to get a whole lot of people onboarding and try to figure out how they're going to do it. And what a lot of people forget sometimes is you have to be thinking about how you intend to scale in the future before you actually are asked to do that. And sometimes that means that you have to make sure that your tech stack is appropriate, make sure that your staff are ready and able to take on these new challenges challenges, you almost have to do more with less in half the time, sometimes even less than that. So a lot of the companies that we have, when they're starting to move, some of the questions we ask are, well, who's your team? Yes. What kind of technology needs to be in place for you to be able to handle these 5, 10, 15 customers? But suppose you land Walmart, suppose you land Costco. If you suddenly need to be doing 150 orders in a day as opposed to 5 to 10, which you could have done off the side of your desk, how are you going to be able to do that? And it's just a matter of saying that, yes, you have to be able to plan ahead and make sure that it's not one of the last things that you're thinking of.
Such a good point, and a lot of small organizations don't have this capacity, don't have the skill, don't have, the same person who's doing the IT systems is writing the payroll and taking out the garbage. So it's almost like the companies that need the most help are often the least well equipped. I wonder, Jonah, can you talk a little bit about where you see the opportunities? Like, what should SMEs in particular be focusing on when they're looking at the potential of technology to drive productivity, growth, and so on?
Yeah, no, I think from a small business perspective, really like your margins are everything. So I think the first thing is how can you be able to minimize costs as a big thing. So I can give an example for us. One of our biggest cost centers is our technology team. But then with now AI coming on board, it's kind of looking at how can you be able to use AI to reduce our technology costs, right? Whether it's the talent, the expertise that we need, we're able to reduce by leveraging automation and then bridging that gap. I think that's the first step. Secondly, I think it's partnerships. So focusing on what you do best and then partnering with the partners who can be able to minimize, whether it's time to go to market, you're able to optimize for that, but then also expanding the business as you grow. So partnership and then reducing costs can enable you to be able to increase productivity and focus on what you're really good at as a small business.
Thanks so much. And what about you, Deborah? Do you have any what are the high priorities for SMEs looking at technology?
So it was mentioned here, thank you for asking. It was mentioned here, and I really think one of the key things that a lot of people we see with the small and medium-sized businesses, the professor, he mentioned that e-commerce is necessary for every business now. It's absolutely necessary. And also your business plan, it has to have a forecast out at minimum 5 years, 5 to 10 years, not a year, not 2 years. What's going to happen in 5 to 10 years? And so what are your, it was said earlier, what are the tactics? What are things that we're going to do? But also, I want to talk from a different place, and I hear everybody talking about AI, but we also have quantum computing that's coming up. But what are the safeties you have in place? What insurances, what protections do we have in place to make sure that your small business is protected or your medium-sized business is protected? We talked about, earlier we talked about finding resources, but have we thought about how we're going to bring in money or we're going to have a scalable business? So do you have, if your product, like John said, if your product was, you can do 5 or 10 and now you need more, what are your plans around that? So those are the major things I'm thinking about.
Such good points. And I think you mentioned protection and risks. I mean, cybersecurity is one of the things that small, medium enterprises often overlook. And it's one of the most important because if your data gets compromised, you're dead in the water. What about you? What do you think? What would you add to the conversation?
When you're starting a business, you have to identify what the tools are, and that's your tech. But you have to choose what you need immediately and then plan for future use. In other words, you don't buy everything you think you're going to need at the very beginning, but you have to be able to expand it. So it's wise to choose by building the Rolls Royce up here and then working back to what you need today, and make sure that whatever products you choose can be scaled with you. This is budgeting. I'm a financial planner. It's budgeting. It's managing the expectations. It's, yes, it would be nice to have, but I don't need it today. This is what I need today, and you don't want to go into debt on your tech when you have other things you have to consider. So it's always a balancing act between what you need now, what you need in the future, how you're going to scale that, and plan and budget for it.
And it's interesting because some of the companies that John deals with, and I'm sure Jonah as well, already have tech skills baked into them. But think about how many people in the audience are from tech companies? Okay, a few. How many are in things like retail or services or consulting? So a few more. How many of you have other kinds of small businesses that you're running that are not tech? And some of you, I think, are from associations. So while in some sectors there are lots of tech skills, in lots of other sectors there aren't. So what do you recommend for small mainstream businesses outside of tech to make sure that they are sufficiently tech-enabled to meet their goals?
I think they need to ask questions. One of the things that Deborah mentioned is the fact that people need to have a business plan that's 5-10 years out. One of the challenges that we have with that is, yes, you need to be planning. You need to have an idea of where you want your company to go. It's really, really important that you and your business partners are on the same page when that's happening, because there's some people that are hoping to just sell early. It's like we want to start to scale, sell early, and exit. They don't have to think about where the tech needs to be necessarily, as they need to make sure that this is something that's going to get a really good valuation and somebody else is going to take it off my hands. If you're the one that's going to take it all the way, then you have to start thinking about that. And a lot of people have been looking at the fact that there are people who are capable of using a computer, using these things, but tech skills, a lot of them are transferable. Not everything is. And some of the things that they grew up, I don't want to say grew up, but they started their business using, they may have to take on a completely different software, or if the software that their company is built on and has been using for 5-10 years or 5 or 10 months, depending on how long you were in operation, if that company goes under, they also need to find a replacement. So for us, it's always a matter of reminding them you have to have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, probably a little bit further, because you have to go with the assumption that not everyone is always going to be there for you. So it's always about building an ecosystem that you have. Make sure, yes, your tech is important. Where that tech comes from is also important. And you also have to always be watching how those tech companies themselves are performing, because if someone else has a breach, that may also affect you in the long run, even if you've dotted your I's and crossed your T's.
And it's interesting because I think a lot of small business owners love tech. They live and breathe tech, and others have their head in the sand and think, I'll stick to the knitting. Everybody needs a basic level of technology literacy. Everybody needs to understand how the tech will support their goals. You can't entirely rely on the quote experts to tell you what to do about your business. So where do you go for support? Where can you get help?
Do you want me to answer that?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
I think the first thing you need to do is you have to determine where the human intersects with the tech. So depending on your business, you want the tech to take on those repetitive business decisions, and gathering of data and all of that can be done with technology. But you have to determine where you intersect with your client. Where is it important that you have that human contact? And so when you're looking at tech, you have to define, first of all, what you need and what you think you need and how you want to use that. And then there are many tech companies out there. So you have to find the one that answers to your needs. So, and anyone I've taught will laugh at me, but deep dive research. Don't take the first tech company that promises you the world. Find out if they match what you need. Find out if they are on the same thought process as you. Are they going to sell you all the bells and the whistles and everything to make money, or are they going to sit down with you and be one of your partners and help you resolve your issues? So you're looking for that tech company that is with you on the long term, that will allow you to grow, and they're going to be there in the future when you start to grow and need adaptations and adoptions, and they're going to think the way you think so that they can help you grow your business.
I think that's such a good point. It's not just the tech you're looking for, it's tech that meets your needs. You know what your needs are, and so you have to work with partners who actually speak English or French or one of the official languages, not computer gobbledygook, and can actually actually explain to you what their products and services are going to do to advance your business. You're laughing, Deborah. What would you add to this? Where do you get help to actually grow your business using tech?
I do agree, but I really believe in the incubators, the people that are representative, some that are and are not here. So, like the CASA and FACE, and we have like the Phoenix Fire, but incubators, we don't have to, yesterday, I don't know how many people were here, but one young lady showed a seed, and then she showed it when it was just a seed, and then it grew to the different stages, and it was a little seedling that went through. And to think that like the mighty oak or whatever, they all started with like an acorn or a little seed, right? So incubators, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can make a better wheel, but starting in those places, but really do your research, really a deep dive. A lot of small and medium-sized businesses, they don't go as deep as they should just because they feel like, oh, I'm just doing it off the side of my desk or for my kitchen or whatever. But I had to pull this statistic up because I wanted to make sure I had it right. So in Canada, we have 1.3 million, approximately 1.3 million businesses, but in the United States versus 33.2 million businesses, right? And so sometimes we think locally, and then that limits us. And we should also think not just locally, but globally, because if you are in an e-commerce space, which is necessary, you're not just competing with the people next to you, but it's the people across the water and beyond, and also know what they have so you can have a similar product offering, or if not better.
And Jonah, anything to add to this? Where should people go for help?
Yeah, no, I think for us, so I can share from personal experiences, one of the resources that we have leveraged as a small business has been the National Research Council. I think it's a very supportive organization. They can give you one all the way from like, okay, their cybersecurity threats. They have the ITAs who are specialized in different technical skills that you might not have as a small business owner or with a limited team. I think one big thing too that we worked with them was just around IP strategy. Right? As a small business, your processes, your intellectual property is really important, especially in this data economy. It could be like your main resource as a small business. So how do you protect it? And then how do you strategically use that as a small business owner to enhance your business, whether you're looking to get acquired, to partner, and work with different organizations? I think National Research Council is a go-to resource.
And we've heard a lot generally over the last few years about the digital divide and how that affects some people more than others. And while COVID really accelerated the pace of digitization and the adoption of technology, it left a lot of people behind. And one of the most horrifying stats that I recall is that during COVID, 42% of racialized students in Toronto, one of the largest, richest city in the country, were doing their homework on iPhones because they did not have access to computers, networks. Not because computers and networks don't exist in downtown Toronto, but because their families couldn't afford them. And so when we think about the gaps in different communities, it includes not just, remote communities, Indigenous communities that simply don't have access to the infrastructure, but even in this city, there are people who can't afford access to the technology. There are small businesses that don't have the skills that are required. We know that women are much less likely to adopt technology, for example, than men. Although AI is the exception, we've just done some research that suggests that generative AI is kind of the English major's revenge. It's going to help bridge a lot of those gaps. But what are some of the strategies you think we need to address in order to make sure that the increased use of these technologies, and especially AI, but others as well, doesn't increase the gaps gaps between the haves and the have-nots, between women-led businesses and those led by men, those led by racialized people and immigrants and others. Although I think a lot of immigrant-led businesses are actually way ahead of businesses of Canadian-born people. Are there things that come to mind in terms of bridging those gaps to make sure that we're leveling the playing field, not creating barriers?
One of the things that I encourage is if you are in North America, we keep saying e-commerce. But if you go to Africa, in many of the countries, it's m-commerce, it's mobile commerce. They have a choice, own a computer or own a telephone. The telephone is far more practical for them. You have to make sure that everything that you create digitally can be read and used on the phone. It's nice to have a computer, but it has to be on the phone. So it's your creative, how it fits on the screen, how they access it, how they use it. So when I'm working in Kenya, we're working on phones, and everything that we've created is m-commerce. Then we have to look at how people pay for things. We're very lucky. We have Interact, we have credit cards, we have banking systems. We make assumptions that are wrong. The assumption is that everybody in the world is the same as us. Well, they aren't. They've skipped generations of technology. They've adopted new technologies. When I lived in Mexico, which was many moons ago, everybody had cell phones, car phones. When I came back to Canada, I said, well, where are the phones? Okay, because to own a telephone in Mexico, you had to own stock in the telephone company. So they had skipped a whole generation. There were no landlines. And that's what's going on in Africa, and I respect you greatly, sir. Africa is moving ahead so quickly. They're getting rid of, they don't have the infrastructures to work with. They're creating their own new ones, and they're skipping generation after generation of technology, and they're picking up the newest. And we need to be looking at them, because they're now teaching us how we can actually adopt what is being created in Africa and bring it to North America. And since we're working the reverse right now, we're working from Canada and the US to Kenya, our first job, the most important job that we did, was spend 3 years building our team in Kenya and learning from them first how to run our business the Kenyan way. Not the North American way, the Kenyan way. And we just launched this weekend. So we're in business.
Congratulations.
Reminds me when I was in Soweto, South Africa in like 1996, they had more mobile phones than we did in Canada. So such an important point that we can rethink our assumptions. Anything to add, Deborah?
I really think that's fantastic. I was in South Africa in March, and you're right. And I want to make a correction. So when I say e-commerce, it includes m-commerce, but you're right. So it's amazing. So just based on what Cheryl just said, again, we look at North America as the be-all and end-all sometimes, like feeling like we are setting it, but other nations are far advanced. And so I wanted to add something. I heard some communication earlier, but registering yourself, like being as unique as you are, there is benefit and profit in that. You know, the government is giving to women initiatives. We know that. There's also Black initiatives. There's also people of color initiatives. There's BIPOC initiatives where there is money allocated. So be yourself. You don't have to be like the person that maybe doesn't reflect who you are, European, Asian, doesn't matter. There are allocations for us, and the more that we try to be like someone else, we are leaving money on the table. So do more, be unique, but think more broad-based, and think long-term. Be in the long game. You know, think, okay, I'm here today. Where do I want to be? And like I said, there's 1.3 million Canadian businesses, 33.2 million in the United States, but also small business is more than 90%, and it was said earlier, small business is more than 90%. So when you are hiring, you don't have to necessarily, and I don't mean this in a negative way, you don't necessarily have to hire the cheapest person that you could get. Look at if they are really benefiting. Make sure that your workplace reflects the world at large, and we can go really far. Know that we have value, each and every one of us, every race, creed, color, every sexuality, whatever. It doesn't matter. We all bring something very special to the table, and we should remember that and use that to move forward.
That's great, thanks. John, how about in your environment, how do you address some of those, the gender and other differences you see in the people that you're dealing with?
So I'll have to hit two questions at the same time. I think one of the things that we had not realized sometimes is that there's that socioeconomic division within some of the students that we have at the university level, at the college level, who are also running a business. And there were a few people who, like, Carleton has a really, really good, fantastic campus, but we also have this fantastic tech park that's growing in Ottawa in the Canada region. And a lot of us try to do events in both sections. And what we didn't realize at first is that there are quite a few students that are from the Ottawa area who have a car, who can get from Carleton to Canada within 25 minutes to an hour, depending on traffic. But there were a ton of students who didn't actually have a way of getting up there unless, like, they had to take public transit, and they would take almost an hour and 25 minutes to get there, and if they missed a bus, it was an extra half an hour. And what we started to do is, like, simple things. We've got taxi chits for students who want them. You facilitate access to the same thing, but you don't have to put it out there so that we're saying, if you can't afford to do this, raise your hand and come and tell us. It's like, no, we have this for you. It's here. It's just making sure that everybody is aware of the fact that there are more than one way to actually get there. You think of the different products that you have and that sort of thing. One of the things that we had also been struggling a little bit with is the fact that we have a lot of international students who, it's like they've made their tuition payments. They're paying a whole lot more than the other Canadian students are doing, and we sometimes forget that. So we're looking at trying to figure out how we can get people who are coming from different areas to access the same things. They have the same course load. Some of them have to do a job in addition to studying and something else, and they're also trying to launch a business. The average age sometimes for the students who are studying at university is also going up. Quite a few of them have families. So it's not just a matter of when we're delivering programs, when we're saying we've got an information session, you can come and learn about this. Let's talk about FACE. Let's talk about different options. You have to make sure that you're thinking about all the different kinds of people that are attempting to access this. If you have people who are building families, men don't have the same downtime that women do. It's just how nature works. So you have to think about it. If you're a female entrepreneur and you have to build in running having a kid in the middle of running your business, is there a backup? Do you have a system to help you? And if you don't, where else can you get support? So that's the kind of thing that we have to sort of think in the back of our mind. We try to make sure that our mentors are as inclusive as possible, in the sense that a lot of our students, that the new founders, want to see themselves in the people that we bring in to present to them, the people that we choose as mentors and advisors. That's important. We also bring in people who have failed once or twice, because that, for me, is almost more important than the people who just hit pay dirt from day one. A lot of the students that are coming up now rarely are told no. Everyone that has come in essentially is, you're fantastic, this is a great idea, this is going to be successful. And when we go, it's like, and what happens if this happens? And what are you going to do if two other people have your idea and they can do it faster than you can, and they're not ready for that? So it's reminding people that there's more than one way to do every single thing that they do, making sure that we are thinking about the good, the bad, the ugly in as many different areas as possible.
I love what you said about all the wraparound supports, and some of the programs like Scatting Court runs for immigrant women, they have daycare on site. The programs they run for immigrants have English language training. We run a Black Youth Action Plan, Advanced Digital and Professional Training Program. We give loaner computers and those rocket things because we know the kids don't have access to internet and computers. So I think that's such an important, because everyone talks about digital skills and digital literacy, and there's these training programs and those training programs, and we're hearing more and more about meritocracy as if we have a level playing field. And as you pointed out, we absolutely do not. And so we need to think about what we can do to make a difference. Any other notions, Jonah?
Yeah, no, I'll just quickly add, I think from a macro perspective, I think it's important to have a public-private sector approach, just because I think right now with technology, especially access to technology, you have to take it as important as access to electricity, right, whereby the government is stepping in and subsidizing those things. And I also think like there's a huge problem that's also included with our telecommunication sector, whereby the prices are really high, right? I think Canada has one of the highest prices in the G7. So that makes that digital divide even wider. So how do we increase competition or look at ways to be able to solve that problem? And then on the micro, I think there's an approach that we can take in terms of enabling access to STEM education earlier on, so that people from underserved communities can also be part of building the solutions as they grow older, so that they can tailor them to their situations. Yeah.
So at this point, and I'll give everyone a chance to wrap up at the end, but at this point I wanted to ask, are there any questions or comments in the audience, things that folks would like to share? The roving mics are there for you.
Hi, thank you. My name is Abby. I really enjoyed the session. I think when we talk about technology adoption, oftentimes or like most panel, the discussion is around IT and digital marketing. But then I wanted to ask with regards to data. So apart from supporting entrepreneurs in BC and Vancouver, I also run a data and analytics company, started in Ghana, supported about 500 entrepreneurs in Ghana and Kenya, expanded to South Africa and Nigeria. And now I've moved the business here because, as Deborah and Cheryl mentioned, going global, but also I've seen that the gap with entrepreneurs or businesses here trying to do business on the continent is data, understanding how to do it, what is required. And so, for example, if a business here wanted to move their business or do business in, let's say, Ghana, I could tell you for your target group how much they are willing to spend, what their average income looks like because of data. Now, the question is, when we talk about technology adoption within this landscape, how does data play a role within Canada for small businesses? Or how do we think adopting data could move the needle for some of these small businesses? If you have any expertise on how businesses have been using data or how that adoption looks like, I'll be very interested in hearing about that.
Such a great question. Who would like to take it?
I would like to take that. I love that. So I work on mainframes, part of my day job, and basically what a mainframe is, it's a giant server. But the necessity around using a mainframe is because customers these days, there's so many facets to a customer, right? Like we could have a John or a Deborah or a Cheryl, and where we live, where we work, where we go to school. So data is huge. It is so huge that they haven't even been able to get to the bottom of what they call data pools. They're data lakes now, right? Because there's so much data, and we can, my grandfather used to say, you can cook a man with electricity. You can cook a man or cook a man's dinner, right? It's the same thing with data. Like data is so useful and helpful. But we could also almost drown in it. It's so much data. And another thing that I'll always think about the risk of things, and I want to see things build. There's a lot of risk around just having data floating around. So we give our information away every day in so many different ways, and then our information is stored in the cloud, and people think the cloud is up in the sky, but it's not. It's like a server farm or a mainframe farm somewhere housed that holds more data. So data is critical. It's so important because data becomes information, right? Like data is the raw stuff that makes information. So you asked the question on how important it is. It is essential. To me, it is part of the infrastructure. It's the building block. It's what type of software do you need? It's how can we help our students? It's who lives here, who lives where, right? Data is it's almost like the air of your company, because if you want to build a successful company, you have to know the who, how, what, where, when, and it's the data that fills that information in. Anybody else? Go
I'd
ahead.
like to add to that. Data is data. It's how you use it.
Yeah.
So that's the leap that we all forget. There's so much data out there. If you don't get it organized and don't get reports done properly, it's useless. Or it can lie to you if you don't gather it properly. So that's where AI really comes in being able to mine that data deeply and give you the kinds of research, long-term research, short-term research that you need for your business and for the business that you're in. In other words, your unique business, but also the industry that you're in. And you need to be monitoring both in order to understand where the business is going. And so that's where data is really important, but you have to know what questions to ask. If you don't have the right questions and you're not listening, then it's useless. So it's really understanding the value of data, how to mine the data, what questions to ask, and how they impact your business. I'm working with someone in the North Country, because that's where I live, and in 2 years, the amount of data she'll be able to gather will require AI, and she'll be hooking up with the federal government because she's unique in what she's doing without releasing any information. Also, we're talking about access. Okay, when I first went up to Huntsville, which is about 3 hours drive up, I could only access my internet through a cell tower. I now have Starlink, which is phenomenal. But that's a huge issue in Canada. You get outside the urban areas, and 90% of the Canadian population lives within 100 kilometers of the US-Canada border. But there's huge groups of people in the North Countries, right across the country, that don't have the same access. You also have an issue with age. Not everyone has capability, and so I'm working with elderly people in my financial planning, and they suddenly have lost touch with their finances because their financial institutions switched to entirely online, and they're not capable of managing the online because of disabilities. So you have to think about who your client base is. Technology is wonderful. I've always adopted it as quickly as I could, but I also have to look at all those people out there that for good reasons can't access it or are incapable of doing so because of physical limitations or mental limitations. So you have to identify your client base, and you need to be able to speak to them in the language of technology or paper, or offer both, to ensure that they're constantly being communicated with.
At risk of getting fired, because we could talk about this stuff forever, but I do have to keep us on time. I just wanted to add that I really think the data question is such an important one, because we hear a lot of talk about technology adoption, and often it's quantum computing and AI and digital twins and AR, VR, and often the discussion of data is something that doesn't get addressed. So thank you very, very much for raising that. We are at time, unfortunately. I want to give everyone half a minute to just offer their final comments, and I'll start with you, Jonah.
Final comments. I think I'll just add on that data piece, because I think one thing just around the data as a final comment. In Canada, there's structural issues around access to quality data, as well as the utility of the data. So from a finance perspective in the financial services sector, one thing that we've been advocating for the past it's close to a decade now, open banking. We need that to be able to utilize the customer data and provide better services. So there are structural issues that can block the utilization of data, which I think it needs to be resolved to be able to improve that. But yeah, that's my final comment.
Thanks so much. John?
I think in probably the one thing that we always remind people when they're thinking about technology and trying to be able to finance that side of things is we remind people, make sure that you're doing your homework and you're trying to find access to any sort of funds that can actually help you. The one thing that we remind them is that not all money is created equal. You really do have to figure out whether you're getting this with what the strings are, where you're allowed to spend it, what you're allowed to spend it on, and what the reporting requirements are, if any. That's always the thing that seems to trip up a couple of people when they're trying to get their company to move rapidly forward, and that tech piece can really make or break you when you're trying to scale.
Great point. Deborah?
So these guys stole what I was about to say. So I just wanted to say something. It's that you know the product that you have, the greatest companies that are out right now. So if you think about the Nikes and you think about Elon Musk and everything like that, they created a need really for themselves. They created something so good that they actually needed for themselves. The founder of Nike, he just wanted a good shoe. He was a runner. Elon Musk, you know, I don't know how many people know this, that he worked for Scotiabank and he created PayPal as something, there was a need. So create something that you really need, and you'd be surprised how it might scale, because there's 8 billion of, I don't know the exact number, it changes every day, right? But there are billions of people in this planet, and we don't know what they don't know. So start creating, instead of looking at, oh, maybe somebody, listen to your customer, but create for yourself something really great, and it will work for more people than you know.
Great advice. 30 seconds, Cheryl.
Okay. Know your business. Know the world that you live in that business, and do deep research and choose the best choices for you, the people you work with, and the technology that you adopt.
Wonderful. Thanks very much. Big round for the panel. And back to you.
All right, thank you very much.